When I was in Burma, I was hated by a great number of people. This was probably the first time in my life when I was important enough for this to happen to me. You see, I was something called the sub-divisional police officer in the town. And I was that at a time when anti-European feeling was both pervasive and very bitter. As far as I could tell, the sentiment was also aimless and petty. But this realization didn't make my life any easier at all. The young Buddhist priests were the worst of all. And they were everywhere. There seemed to be thousands of them. And they seemed to have nothing better to do than to stand on street corners and jeer at Europeans. All of this was very perplexing and quite unsettling to me, especially because I had already concluded that imperialism was an evil thing, and the sooner I chucked my job, the better. Secretly, I was all for the Burmans, and I hated my job, truly hated it, more bitterly than I can tell you. Now, I must tell you that in a job like mine, you get to see the empire at very close quarters. I have vivid memories of wretched men huddling in their stinking cages, of the scarred buttocks of those that had been flogged with bamboos. But you see, I had no perspective on any of this. I certainly didn't even know that the British Empire was dying. Nor did I have any awareness at all, none at all, that it would prove to be better than any of the younger empires, such as the Soviet Empire, that have come along since then. All I really knew at the time was that I was stuck between my hatred of the British Empire and my rage at the evil-spirited little beasts who were doing their best to make my job impossible. Then one day something happened that gave me a new glimpse into the real nature of imperialism. My supervisor rang me up to tell me that an elephant had gotten loose in the local bazaar and was ravaging it, and would I please go do something about it? So I picked up my .44 Winchester and set out. I knew that the gun was not big enough to actually kill an elephant, but I thought the noise might at least drive it off. Along the way, local Burmans informed me of the elephant's doings. It seems that the beast had temporarily gone mad, having already knocked over a hut, and killed a cow, and raided a few fruit stalls. Well, in the next minute, I discovered something much worse. Coming around a corner, I happened upon a dead man, lying face down in the mud. His face was literally caked with mud. His eyes were open, wide open. His teeth were bared. It was a frightful sight. Never, by the way, tell me that dead men look peaceful. Most of the corpses that I have seen have really looked rather devilish, and this one was perhaps the worst. Well, it had to have been the work of the elephant, but where was he? Someone told me that the mad beast was in the paddy field, some 200 yards away. Quickly, a crowd began to gather. No doubt, for some it was a chance to have a bit of fun. For others, perhaps, there might be some meat to take home. All of this made me vaguely uneasy. For you see, I had no intention of actually shooting the elephant. Besides that, the idea of having a crowd following me was unnerving, to say the least. And then I laid eyes on the elephant. At that precise moment, I knew that I wouldn't shoot it. In the first place, this was a working elephant, and in Burma, it was a very serious matter to shoot a working elephant. And this one was now simply grazing. It looked no more dangerous than a cow. Then I turned around to look at the crowd. There must have been 2,000 of them, and growing larger by the minute. I could see some of their faces. They were faces filled with excitement. At that moment, I knew that I would have to shoot the elephant after all. You see, it was expected of me. I should think it was right then, that the hollowness, the utter futility of the white man's dominion in the East hit home to me. There I was, the leading actor in the piece, and yet I was nothing more than an absurd puppet. A puppet, yes, being pushed to and fro by that sea of yellow faces. What was I but an empty, posing dummy, and one that had no choice but to shoot that elephant? After all, if I didn't shoot it, the crowd would laugh at me, and that had to be avoided at all costs. You see, my whole existence in the East, every white man's existence in the East really, was really little more than one long struggle to avoid being laughed at. I should think it was then that I understood that when the white man turns tyrant, it really is his own freedom that he loses. Of course, I still had a bit of time to think. I did manage to tell myself that what I ought to do was to walk within, perhaps 25 yards of the beast and test its behavior. If it charged, I could shoot it. If it did nothing, I could safely let it alone. But then it occurred to me that I was going to do no such thing. In the first place, I was standing in mud into which I sank deeper with each step. In the second place, I was, and I still am, a very poor shot. Now, so if the elephant did charge, and I missed, I would have had about as much chance to escape as a toad under a steamroller. So, let's be honest here. Let's be quite honest here. I did have more than a bit of fear in me. But I was not afraid in the ordinary sense of the word. I certainly wasn't afraid as I would have been had I been alone. No, my real fear, yes, my real fear, was that if something went wrong, those 2,000 plus vermins would see me pursued, caught, trampled upon, and reduced to a grinning corpse like that dead man, caked with mud. And then, no doubt, many in the crowd would laugh. And that would never do. No, that would never do. So I knew right then and there, that I really had no choice in the matter. So what did I do? I shoved the cartridge into the magazine and lay down on the road to get a better shot. The crowd was going to have its bit of fun after all. When I fired, I didn't hear the bang or feel the kick. The only thing that I heard was the devilish roar of glee that went up from the crowd. And the elephant? The beast sagged flabbily to its knees. Its mouth slobbered. It was suddenly stricken, shrunken, immensely old. It was as though a great senility had come over it in an instant. But it did not fall. Hit with a second shot, it still refused to fall. Not until the third shot did the elephant actually collapse. When I got up, the vermins were already rushing past me through the mud. I knew at once that the beast would never rise again. But even from a distance I could tell that it was not dead. It really was a dreadful thing to look at that great beast, powerless to die and yet powerless to move. So I retrieved my rifle. and proceeded to put shot after shot into its mouth and heart. And still, it lived. Its desperate gasps continued as steadily as the ticking of a clock. After a while, I could stand it no longer and left. Later, I was told that it had taken the elephant a half hour or more to die. Afterwards, as you might imagine, there were endless discussions in the village about my shooting the elephant. Its owner, of course, was furious, but he was a local and could do nothing about it. Among the Europeans, opinion was divided. The older ones thought I'd done the right thing, but the younger ones looked at the matter quite differently. They thought it was a damn shame to shoot a working elephant just because it had killed a coolie. I wonder if any of them at all, realized that I had done what I had done merely to avoid looking the fool.